for yourself, the kind of the trying to, like you just did, find positives out of a game when you don't have the mix that you're necessarily going to have in like a serious game?
It's just you don't. Just talking about with my coaching staff, we don't go into games thinking tonight's going to be rough or we can't win. Like we our belief level, expectations, the standards, they don't change. It's just this has been like the normal all season, so it's not really like it's
Welcome to Access Sportsnet Lakers, brought to you by your Toyota dealers. We make it easy. I'm Chris McGee alongside Derek Fisher and James Worthy. We have Mike Trudell out in Portland. Frustrating night for the Lakers. Shorthanded again tonight. They fall to the Blazers up in Portland as the Lakers continue to pile up in the loss column. Guys, they've lost 5 of 6. Portland made 16 threes, out-rebounded the Lakers by 15. Portland also with 27 second-chance points. We knew without the bigs tonight, rebounding would be an issue, and they got 57 points from their bench tonight. Big game.
I would think under normal circumstances, those are like, the numbers wouldn't be exactly like that. We keep talking about the injuries, and they do matter. When you're without 2 of your centers and Austin Reeves, that's a tough start. That's to get that behind you. Lakers just gave up too many free throws. Too many extra points, a lot of points in the paint. And the bench, they need time. And I don't think it'll get any better till they get a day or two to really develop some defensive structure when they get some healthy players back. Because that's where it is. I mean, they can score, they can play with most teams, but the defense is lacking, and putting people on the line is not a good formula.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I kind of want to start with it. I think when you're shorthanded and you're going to have, maybe guys that aren't playing a ton of minutes filling in, the intangibles, the hustle points, the 50-50 balls, those things you have to win because you're not going to have the talent you're missing in Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic. You're not going to offset their scoring, but you can, the things that take zero talent, you can fill in. Rebounding, boxing out, switching on defense correctly. And those are the things, if you can shore those things up, then as you get your healthy guys back, then your team is much better off. But right now they're having a difficult time just stopping people on the defensive end. And so it makes any effort to try to win some of these games just really a challenge, especially with so many games coming up on the road.
All right, well, let's look at the Lakers' struggles, guys. They have lost 9 of their last 14 games. That dates back to almost a month ago, December 20th. When they lost to the Clippers, and has carried over here into January. The record of the last 6 games, 1-5. You see the points and the opponent's points and the point differential at 6.8. James, I'll start with you. If you just look at the last 5, which they've gone 1-4, and we talked about this over a week ago. We knew they'd have 5 games in 7 nights. We also knew that it was 5 opponents under 500, where they had been great, but they were also young teams, athletic teams that are playing better, and they got the best of the Lakers, and the Lakers have struggled now 1-4 in those last 5 against those teams.
Yeah, and what's really tough about that is a lot of them have been at home, where you think you want to, win at home, protect your yard, but records to me don't mean anything anymore in this league. These players are so athletic and they're so capable, and if you don't have your antennas up for certain things like defense and hustle plays, any team can come in and beat you. And especially, it seems like especially they've been kicking our butt, so that just lets you know that we're not quite where we should be as a unit yet. A lot of that has to do with the injuries. A lot of that has to do with lack of practice time, and the combination of those two makes it really more difficult to try to assemble teams on the run, different lineups, bring it up. It makes it very hard. I'd hate to be a coach, have to project that.
And with the Lakers roster, like so much of their usage is in Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves. And so when you take those guys out, the Lakers' style of play is just uniquely different than what they would normally have. and that's throwing everything off. Compared to some of the opponents that they're playing, even though they may be younger teams or teams that are under 500, their style of play is consistent no matter who they have in the lineup. They're playing fast, the ball is flying around, they're shooting threes, multiple guys are playmaking and getting downhill 2 feet into the paint. And so even when they have players maybe that we haven't heard of, they don't have a ton of all-stars, but they're still playing the style of game they're most comfortable playing. Whereas it's almost like the Lakers are being forced to play a style that they're not comfortable playing in, and it's just causing a little bit of difficulty, I think, on both ends, but in particular on the defensive end.
Case in point to what you're talking about, Fish, Portland's without who I think will be a first-time All-Star this year in Denny Avdia for Portland, their best player. But Shaedon Sharpe goes for over 20. Caleb Love goes for over 20, and so does Jeremy Grant. Those three guys are still playing the same style that they always play every single night.
Yeah, and so they don't have to, ramp themselves up to play a game to help their team win that they don't normally play. Whereas on the Lakers, okay, we're coming into the game tonight, we're asking Jake LaRavia to jump up to 25 points, or, we're asking Nick Smith to score 25 points. We're asking Drew Timme to score 20 points, which he did, but those are difficult asks for guys that don't get asked to do that every night, compared to some of those guys for the Blazers.
For sure. And it's hard to assemble. We don't have enough time. It would be nice if you had 3 games and you knew it was going to be whoever, a player, but they don't get that comfort. It's like every night it's somebody out, 2 centers out tonight. So now you got to come with 2 guys that don't have any playing time or any experience. Who knows? The next night it might be guards. So they just haven't had any rhythm or any consistency in lineups. It's been really scattered all over the place, and it's hard. It's hard to be consistent when you have that type of tendencies going on.
Fish, I think this was their 20th different starting lineup.
Yes.
And we're almost at the halfway point. Tomorrow night will be the halfway point. So we are 40 games into this season. I believe, and these numbers could be off by a game or so, that they have had their full plethora of guys, their full top 8, top 9 guys 2 or 3 times all year for a coaching staff, for a team. Very difficult to manage.
Yeah, no, very difficult. You can go back in there. I'm sure there are some outliers, but if you go back through the data of in NBA history, whenever they started tracking lineups, I don't think there's ever been a championship team or a championship caliber contending team that has been in the top 3-5 teams with most different starting lineups during the regular season. You can't name it. You pull that list up now.
You know who's starting.
All the teams that are at the top of the most different starting lineups are not necessarily in the top of the standings or considered to be championship contending teams. It's difficult to put any type of offensive and defensive continuity together with that many different aspects of your team going on.
James, putting all that aside and just looking at tonight's game, and this seems to be the formula. We have seen it now over the past week. Teams are beating this Laker team off the dribble. They're penetrating. They're getting past that first line of defense on the perimeter. Ball's moving. They're able to get points in the paint that way. Also getting beat by the 3 right now as well.
Well, and that's, we talked about this a little bit. That's where you would hope that the guys who are on the floor, because it doesn't take a lot to play defense. It's effort. But still, Geeter, even sometimes effort's not good enough when you haven't been connected together. You might be doing your job. Somebody on the weak side might be a second late. You just haven't had enough practice time. And, Portland has some athletes that are attacking you. So it makes it hard when you don't have practice time, to say, okay, when we do this, we're going to do this. You just kind of got the chalkboard before the game. It's hard to adapt to that. It's just, I don't know what else to say other than you hope you can get some practice time and some players back.
I mean, that's going to be the key. Now, can you wait for that and assume that things are just going to go in reverse order and everything's going to be excellent when the guys come back? No, you can't, which is why you just still have to try and focus on building the right habits.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that's what the coaching staff is trying to do, is when they go back and look at the video, they just want to be able to pull possessions where they can show guys, this is how we need to do it. This is how it's done defensively. These are the right rotations and coverages. Offensively, when we come out of a timeout, executing this action the right way, that is sustainable. when we get guys back, we'll be okay. But if they're not seeing enough of those possessions, that's when it becomes a little bit more frustrating and difficult to stay positive.
And here's what's ahead. Second out of back-to-back will be tomorrow at Crypto.com Arena against Toronto, and then you're out on the road for 8. So a tough sled ahead for the Lakers. Let's hear from Coach J.J. Redick, brought to you by Your.
The Los Angeles Lakers find themselves trapped in a maddening cycle of inconsistency that has become so predictable you could set your watch to it, raising fundamental questions about whether this roster, as currently constructed, possesses the mental fortitude and defensive discipline required to compete at the highest level, or whether we are witnessing yet another season where immense talent gets squandered through poor execution and baffling strategic decisions that leave fans wondering what exactly happens during practice sessions and film study. How many times can we watch this team dominate for a quarter, build a comfortable lead, and then completely disintegrate the moment their best players sit down for a breather, allowing inferior opponents to not just close the gap, but blow the game wide open with embarrassing runs that expose every weakness in the roster construction? When does the front office acknowledge that surrounding two generational talents in LeBron James and Luka Doncic, with a hodgepodge of specialists who excel at exactly one thing while being liabilities everywhere else, is not a recipe for championship basketball, but rather a guaranteed path to first-round playoff exits and summer disappointment? And perhaps most importantly, how long can J.J. Redick continue trotting out lineups that get eviscerated defensively, while hoping that somehow the players will magically figure out rotations and communication that clearly have not been drilled into them through any systematic coaching approach? If you want to continue following this tragic comedy of Lakers basketball, where hope and despair alternate on a nightly basis, make sure to smash that like button right now, because apparently we are all gluttons for punishment who cannot look away from this slow motion car crash unfolding in purple and gold. The most recent embarrassment arrived courtesy of the Charlotte Hornets, who waltzed into Crypto COM Arena and absolutely torched the Lakers defense to the tune of 135 points on 54% shooting from the field and scorching 48% from three-point range. Numbers that represent massive improvements over their season averages and perfectly illustrate the phenomenon Marcus Smart described when he noted that opposing teams always seem to shoot career highs against Los Angeles regardless of their actual talent level or previous performance. The game started exactly as Lakers fans have come to expect, with Luka Doncic absolutely erupting for 19 points in the first quarter, alone on hyper-efficient shooting, LeBron James knocking down early threes, and Marcus Smart contributing a quick 5-point burst that helped build a commanding 3-9, 3-0 lead that felt comfortable enough that you could almost hear the collective sigh of relief from the fan base, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would be a stress-free victory. But if you have watched even 5 Lakers games this season, you knew exactly what was coming next. The inevitable collapse that arrives with the precision of a German train schedule. The moment the starters exit and the bench unit takes the floor without adequate shooting, ball handling, or defensive cohesion to maintain any semblance of competitive basketball. The second quarter was not just bad, it was a complete and utter meltdown of historic proportions, where the Lakers managed to score just 16 points in an entire 12-minute period while allowing 34 to Charlotte, getting outscored by 18 points in a single quarter against a team that entered the game with a losing record and missing key rotation pieces. For 8 excruciating minutes, the Lakers converted exactly 1 field goal, turning the ball over repeatedly, failing to get back in transition defense, and watching helplessly as the ball orchestrated a clinic in pick-and-roll execution that made the Lakers' big men look like they were moving through quicksand. The most damning aspect of this collapse is that it represents the exact same pattern that has plagued this team for weeks now, where Luka plays the entire first quarter and dominates only to sit down at the start of the second. And suddenly the Lakers' offense transforms from a well-oiled machine into a group of guys standing around watching. LeBron James tried to create something out of nothing while it's surrounded by players who cannot consistently knock down open shots or make simple reads. As secondary playmakers, Luka attempted exactly 1 shot in the second quarter after dropping 19 in the first, which tells you everything about how the offensive flow completely disappeared once he checked out. And while you can argue that load management and rest patterns are important for a 39-year-old LeBron and a player like Luka who carries enormous offensive burden, at some point you have to acknowledge that your bench is so catastrophically bad that you cannot afford to have both stars sitting simultaneously unless you enjoy watching double-digit leads evaporate in real time. Marcus Smart's post-game comments about how the Lakers are always hunted and how opposing teams bring their absolute best effort every single night would carry more, wait, if the Lakers were actually good enough to inspire that kind of fear and preparation? But the reality is that teams shoot well against Los Angeles not because they are suddenly possessed by the basketball gods, but because the Lakers' perimeter defense is atrocious and their rotations are constantly late or non-existent, leaving shooters with wide open looks that even mediocre NBA players can convert at high percentages. Smart specifically mentioned how players who shoot 20% suddenly shoot 50% against the Lakers, which is a cute way of deflecting blame onto some cosmic force rather than acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, the defensive scheme is fundamentally broken and the personnel cannot execute even basic principles of help defense include. The frustrating part is that Smart himself embodies the exact problem with this roster construction. A player who brings tremendous effort and toughness on defense while being maddeningly inconsistent offensively, going 3 for 9 one night and then 0 for 7 the next, without any middle ground to steady, reliable production. You look at the box score from the Charlotte game and see Gabe Vincent shooting 0 for 7, Marcus Smart going 3 for 9, and Rui Hachimura managing just 1 for 4. And suddenly it becomes crystal clear why the offense sputters so badly when Luka and LeBron are not on the floor creating advantages and generating open looks that their teammates brick anyway. These 3 rotation players combined for 4 made field goals on 20 attempts across 66 total minutes, which is basketball malpractice of the highest order and represents exactly the kind of inefficiency that cannot be tolerated on a team with championship aspirations. I believe the Lakers have created a roster full of specialists who excel at exactly one skill, while being massive liabilities everywhere else. And when you try to construct lineups from those pieces, you inevitably end up with groups that are either defensively competent, but offensively challenged, or capable of scoring but getting torched on the other end without any ability to find balance. Jard Vanderbilt's phenomenal defensively and attacks the glass with abandon, but he is completely useless offensively beyond standing in the corner and hoping for the occasional putback opportunity. Marcus Smart brings playoff intensity and can guard multiple positions, but he shoots the ball like someone who learned the game last week and thinks volume will eventually overcome his atrocious percentages. Rui Hachimura can knock down, catch, and shoot threes when his feet are set, but he provides 0 defensive resistance and cannot create anything off the dribble or make plays for others. The only player who seems to bring legitimate two-way production consistently is Jake LaRavia, who has quietly emerged as the Lakers' most reliable role player by actually doing multiple things well, rather than being completely one-dimensional. And it is telling that LaRavia has basically supplanted Rui. Hachimura in the starting lineup not through some dramatic performance spike, but simply by being solid and dependable rather than maddeningly inconsistent. LaRavia defends with effort, moves without the ball intelligently, knocks down open threes at a respectable rate, and generally makes winning plays that do not show up in box scores but materially impact the game, which is exactly what you need from your 4th or 5th best player on a contending team. Which brings us to the potential solution that has been floating around Lakers circles for the past week, the possibility of acquiring Klay Thompson either through trade or buyout once Dallas officially pivots to rebuilding mode now that Luka Doncic has been dealt to Los Angeles. According to John Ireland, who covers the Lakers extensively and has legitimate sources within the organization, if Klay Thompson gets bought out by the Mavericks, the first call his agent makes will be to the Lakers because Thompson would love to finish his career in Los Angeles, where his father, Michael Thompson, played and where Klay himself grew up before becoming a Warriors dynasty legend. Ireland specifically stated he has this information on good authority, which in journalism speak means he knows it to be factual rather than just speculating based on logical connections. And given Ireland's track record with Lakers information, there is no reason to doubt the veracity of this reporting. The basketball case for Klay Thompson joining the Lakers is simultaneously obvious and complicated depending on how you evaluate his current abilities versus what he was during his prime years, terrorizing opponents with the Splashed Brothers. Thompson is 35 years old and clearly not the same player who dropped 60 points on 11 dribbles or guarded the opponent's best perimeter scorer for 40 minutes while also providing elite shooting gravity on offense. But he remains a capable shooter who can still get hot and knock down multiple threes in succession when he finds rhythm. And more importantly, he represents exactly the kind of steady veteran presence who understands his role and does not require plays called for him or need the ball to be effective. The Lakers desperately need players who can simply spot up in the corners and convert open looks. When LeBron and Luka collapse defenses, and Thompson has spent his entire career perfecting that exact skill, even if his percentages have declined somewhat in recent seasons. The financial logistics are where things get interesting because Thompson is making $16.6 million this season with a cap hit of 17. $4 million for next year, which some people might argue is too expensive for a 35-year-old role player whose best days are clearly behind him. And that is a fair concern if you are evaluating purely from a dollars per win perspective. but the alternative of waiting for a buyout and signing him to a veteran minimum means another team could swoop in and offer Thompson a better situation or more money. And while Thompson might prefer the Lakers due to family connections and playing with Luka, again, after going to Dallas specifically to team up with him before the trade happened, you cannot just assume he will turn down other offers if they come from legitimate contenders who can offer significant roles and pathway to another championship. The Lakers might actually need to execute a trade to secure Thompson rather than gambling on the buyout market, which would require moving salary to match and potentially attaching a second-round pick or taking back an additional contract to make the math work under the various apron restrictions that govern roster construction. Some Lakers fans will point out that Thompson chose Dallas over Los Angeles when he left Golden State as evidence he does not actually want to be a Laker. But that completely ignores the context that he went to Dallas to play with Luka Doncic and pursue another championship with an elite offensive creator rather than specifically falling in love with Texas culture. So now that Luka's been traded to LA, it makes perfect sense for Thompson to follow his preferred star teammate rather than stick around for a Mavericks rebuild that serves no purpose for a player in the twilight of his career. Thinking about it practically, Thompson would immediately solve some of the Lakers' bench shooting woes by providing a reliable option who can space the floor and knock down open looks when LeBron runs second-unit lineups without Luka on the floor, which has been a complete disaster all season long with the offense grinding to a halt and opposing teams going on massive runs that erase whatever leads the starters. The specific scenario JJ Redick keeps running where LeBron plays with Marcus Smart, Jared Vanderbilt, Rui Hachimura, and various combinations of other role players at the start of the second quarter has been brutally inefficient because nobody can shoot consistently besides maybe Hachimura on a good day, which allows defenses to pack the paint and dare everyone besides LeBron to beat them from the perimeter. Inserting Klay Thompson into that group instead of Gabe Vincent, who was 0 for 7 against Charlotte, suddenly gives you a legitimate shooting threat who commands defensive attention and opens up driving lanes for LeBron to attack or find cutters. The defensive side is admittedly concerning because Thompson is not the lockdown perimeter defender he was during his prime, but is he really worse defensively than Rui Hachimura, who gets beaten off the dribble constantly and provides minimal resistance at the point of attack, or Gabe Vincent, who tries hard but lacks the size and strength to body up bigger wings and gets hunted in playoff matchups when rotations tighten? Thompson still understands defensive principles and positioning even if his lateral quickness has diminished. He has the size and length to contest shots without fouling. And most importantly, he would not represent a downgrade from what the Lakers are currently getting from their wing rotation players who oscillate between mediocre and actively harmful depending on the night. I believe Klay Thompson makes tremendous sense for the Lakers if they can acquire him without surrendering anything of actual value, because even a diminished version of Thompson provides more overall positive impact than watching Gabe Vincent chuck up 7 missed shots or Marcus Smart go 3 for 9 while opponents feast on the Lakers' non-existent perimeter defense. The Lakers need more well-rounded players who can do multiple things competently rather than being elite at one skill and completely useless everywhere else. And Thompson fits that profile as someone who can shoot, understand spacing and movement without the ball, and not be a complete disaster defensively, even if he is not making all defensive teams anymore. The second major development involves the Lakers actively shopping their 2032 first-round pick in an attempt to convert one distant high-value asset into multiple nearer-term picks that arrive sooner and can be packaged together in various trade scenarios, essentially copying the exact strategy Phoenix executed when they traded their 2031 first to Utah and received 3 lesser firsts in 2025, 2027, and 2029 that provide more immediate flexibility. Kevin O'Connor reported that the Lakers have been calling around the league trying to find a trade partner willing to make this swap. And while some cynics have speculated this means the Lakers might be considering tanking and want to stockpile picks for a rebuild, that interpretation makes absolutely no logical sense whatsoever, because if you were actually planning to tank, you would keep your premium assets rather than converting them into lesser picks. The far more reasonable explanation is that Rob Pelinka recognizes the limitations of the Lakers' current asset collection and understands that one distant 2032 first-round pick is not enough ammunition to land an impact player at the trade deadline, but 2 or 3 picks arriving in 2027, 2028, or 2029 suddenly gives you the kind of package flexibility that can pry loose higher caliber targets who command multiple first-rounders in any serious negotiation. This strategy only makes sense if the Lakers are genuinely trying to win now by upgrading the roster through trades rather than waiting. 4 draft picks to develop over multiple years, and it aligns perfectly with the urgency you would expect from a franchise trying to maximize whatever remains of LeBron James's career, while also capitalizing on acquiring Luka Doncic in his prime. The specific packages O'Connor mentioned involving Gabe Vincent plus Jared Vanderbilt or Gabe Vincent plus Max Christie combined with multiple first-round picks suddenly become viable frameworks for pursuing players like Herb Jones or other impact wings who can defend multiple positions and space the floor adequately, which is exactly what this roster desperately needs to have any chance of competing with legitimate contenders like Oklahoma City and San Antonio in the Western Conference. The challenge is finding a team willing to make the pick swap, with candidates likely including Oklahoma City, who has approximately 75 first-round picks stockpiled and can afford to take on long-term assets, or other rebuilding franchises who prefer the higher ceiling of a distant, unprotected first compared to getting multiple picks that will likely fall in the late 20s based on the teams projected to control them. Thinking about the bigger picture strategy, this pick conversion, combined with the potential Klay Thompson acquisition, represents the Lakers attempting to thread an extremely difficult needle where they improve the roster immediately without completely mortgaging the future, maintaining some level of flexibility for next summer when they might have significant cap space. Depending on how various player options and contracts shake out, the 2032 first-round pick carries enormous uncertainty because it projects 7 full years into an unknowable future. So converting that single high variance asset into multiple lower variance picks that arrive much sooner, while also potentially adding a veteran shooter like Thompson on a reasonable contract, would represent solid asset management, even if neither move individually qualifies. As the kind of blockbuster that fundamentally alters championship odds, the final piece of news worth mentioning involves Jackson Hayes being diagnosed with a hamstring injury that will keep him out of action for a short period, but should not represent a long-term absence. With JJ Redick expressing optimism that Hayes could return at some point this weekend, which would provide desperately needed rim protection and vertical spacing that has been sorely missed during his absence. Hayes is not an elite defender by any stretch, but he provides energy, athleticism, and shot blocking ability that makes a noticeable difference in how opposing teams attack the paint. And his chemistry with Luka Doncic in pick-and-roll situations has been one of the few bright spots in an otherwise disjointed offensive system that relies far too heavily on individual creation, rather than collective movement and ball sharing. The broader concern is that the Lakers have too many C-level options without enough A or B-level players beyond their stars, creating a situation where the coaching staff is constantly shuffling lineups, trying to find combinations that work without ever achieving the kind of cohesion and continuity that comes from established rotations playing extended minutes together. Jake LaRavia is solid and brings consistent two-way production. Everyone else ranges from inconsistent to actively harmful depending on the night and the matchup, with Marcus Smart being great defensively but terrible offensively, Rui Hachimura providing shooting when his feet are set but offering zero defense, Jared Vanderbilt being a monster on the glass and defending in space, but completely useless with the ball in his hands, and Gabe Vincent representing the ultimate boom or bust player who either looks like a rotation piece on a good team or someone who should be riding the bench in street clothes. I believe the Lakers are stuck in basketball purgatory where they are clearly too talented to bottom out and tank, but not well constructed enough to legitimately threaten for a championship without significant roster. Upgrades that address the shooting and defensive consistency issues that plague them on a nightly basis. Klay Thompson would help marginally by providing veteran shooting and playoff experience. Converting the 2032 pick into multiple nearer-term selections would create more trade flexibility to pursue impact players. And getting Jackson Hayes back healthy gives them another option at the 5 to pair with DeAndre Ayton, depending on matchups and what the specific game requires. But ultimately, this roster needs more players who can do multiple things well rather than specialists who excel at one skill while being disasters everywhere else. And that kind of comprehensive roster overhaul probably requires multiple transactions rather than 1 or 2 tweaks around the margins that leave fundamental structural problems unaddressed heading into the most critical stretch of the season.